How's it going, guys, and welcome to Game Involved. I'm Shifty Cow, and in today's video we're going to be talking about some loadouts and tactics that seem to work pretty well on the new Zavod night map. Now before we get into it, if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, be sure to smack that like button down below. Let's try and get this video to 25 likes, but anyways guys, let's just hop into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is something that I hear a lot in the Battlefield chat whenever I'm in-game, and a lot of people are saying that you really have to run with an IRNV or a FLIR if you want to do well, and that's really just not true at all. I play on a pretty standard brightness, it's around 85. That is a little bit bright, but if you want to play competitively, typically you're going to play with a higher brightness, and then for my monitor, it's a pretty standard brightness. I haven't really adjusted it or anything, so that's going to be at default. So for most people, it should be pretty good to be able to see people out to 70 or 80 meters, and really it's just something you actually have to get used to in noticing where players are. So the first class I wanted to talk about is of course the Assault class, because that's probably the most popular class in Battlefield 4, but anyways, for most of it I was using either the AEK, M416, or the AN94, and with that I would usually throw on something like a reflex sight. That's just kind of my personal favorite. I tried throwing on an IRNV every once in a while, but really you don't need it all that much. Some people have really tough times trying to see people, but the IRNV and the FLIR sight have been nerfed pretty significantly, so it's not going to be black and white just like it was before. You're actually going to have to be able to slightly see someone before just having a massive heat signature. So I usually throw on something like a reflex sight, and then the only thing that I change is throwing on a suppressor. I usually don't run suppressors on assault rifles, but because it's a much more stealthier map and there's really only close quarter engagements, these are really helpful. So I would recommend just taking your regular class, throwing on maybe a suppressor, and then maybe a laser sight, depending on how many people are actually using FLIRs. As for your gadgets, I would recommend keeping them pretty stock with a defibrillator and a med bag, and the only thing you might want to change depending on your playstyle is switching your grenade from something like an M67 over to a FLIR, but that really just depends on playstyle. But I would also make sure that your secondary pistol, my personal favorite is the Deagle, I would make sure that that has a suppressor also, so you're just going to stay off the minimap as much as possible. The big thing with this map is that if you stay off the minimap and you're not spotted, chances are you're going to do so much better because first of all, visibility is very limited, and really people are going to be relying on their spotting system and their minimap a whole lot more than they would with the regular version of Zavod. So for pretty much every class I would recommend a suppressor other than something like a sniper, and really that's up to personal preference. If you want to go like CS5 and go really aggressive recon, sure, do that, but just make sure that you have a suppressor as much as possible. So moving on to the engineer class, this is pretty similar to the assault class in terms of its attachments. I would recommend either a FLIR or a reflex sight, just personal favorites, and then also you might want to throw on something like a laser sight or a flashlight. It really depends, but those are really good for countering people who are using the IR scopes. Moving on to the support class, I really didn't get a lot of time to play with it on the night map, but I would highly recommend going with something that has a high fire rate or a high damage, something like the 240B, MG4, AWS, something to that effect, because chances are most of the battles that you actually come across on this map are really close quarters and you want to make sure that you can do really well. So I would not go with something like the LSAT unless you just really want to do some long range shooting, and even then the gameplay is going to be really slow. So moving on to the attachments, I would keep these pretty stock with C4 and an ammo bag, because C4 on this map is really good, because first of all, vehicles are going to have a much tougher time actually finding you, so I was able to just kind of secretly slip on a couple of things of C4 onto tanks, and then they would just drive away and I'd blow them up pretty easily. So C4 is definitely an amazing gadget for this map, so we're going to move over to the recon class. Now, this was by far one of my favorite classes to play on this night map, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, like I said before, the minimap just completely controls how this round actually plays out, and really it can determine who actually wins the round. So if you have one player who's just using something like the MAV and just spotting people all round long, they easily win the round pretty much every time because there's such limited visibility and people are much more reliant on the minimap. So I would highly recommend going with something like an MAV, maybe the motion balls, tugs, really just whatever your favorite is for spotting people. And then for your secondary gadget, I would of course go with the C4 because like I said before, it's really good for taking out vehicles. So as for actual sniper rifles, I was very surprised at how effective these things are. Once you get the hang of actually spotting soldiers and seeing what they look like in the dark, it really is just a ton of fun to snipe. Now, what I mean by actually noticing what they look like, they seem to be kind of a dark grayish color or a slightly medium gray, but the whole surroundings of the map are pretty much pitch black or even a slight blue, so they actually kind of stand out a little bit, and once you get an eye for this and you can start noticing soldiers all over the map, it is a blast to just get headshot after headshot. And I think one of the reasons of this is actually in the summer patch, they've reduced the speed that soldiers can move left left and right, so if you're kind of trying to strafe to avoid a sniper, it's not going to be quite as effective. So if you've been sniping for a while, or you just haven't tried sniping completely, I would definitely recommend giving it a try because it is just a ton of fun to line up headshots. Now, one thing I actually did try out was using a bunch of different scopes, from the FLIR to the reflex, all the way over to something like the ACOG, and what I found is actually kind of weird, because I thought that something like the night vision scopes, or even something like the ACOG, would be a lot more effective, solely because it's a lot closer range, and with a sniper it was kind of tough to, you know, shoot at people at long range. But after you get used to it and you can actually see the gray figures and just the total blackness, it is a ton of fun to snipe with just a normal 7, 8, 6x, really just whatever you use. It is a ton of fun to snipe on. So if you haven't tried that out, 10 out of 10 would recommend. But anyways guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you guys did find it helpful and enjoy it, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe if you haven't already, but until next time guys, stay buttery.